talking. You guys can see the screen?
1 second.
Okay.
There you go.
We're good? All right, so talking to remote APIs is kind of where we're going. And what does this effectively mean? It means getting info into our app from outside sources. So I think in that chapter, the first thing you do is you bring in some stuff from some weather API or something like that, and then the second part of it is dealing with Instagram. And I think I put up the code you guys will need to do that project. I think before it looked, just to kind of give you the heads up, AFNetworking has changed in the last 10 days, as has Instagram's API. So that means that part of the course for Thinkful is out of date, but the code that I pasted up on GitHub, or on Slack channel rather, we'll get you to the point where you can read in that stuff. And maybe what we can even do today, as we create our CocoaPod, we'll create a starter application. I can push that up to GitHub, and we'll go ahead and drop the AFNetworking stuff for Instagram in there, so you can see the starting point for it. So you'll be ready for that, and not have to deal with some of the headaches, because the code that Thinkful currently gives you is broken. But in any case, so the first problem we need is, how do we bring third-party or outside information into our application? And one option we have is we can write all of this ourselves. So Swift is capable of speaking the HTTP protocol to outside sources. Okay, so we don't actually need any third-party help in order to do this. The advantage of using third-party help is that they've solved some of the complex problems that we would have to solve on our own if we were to write this using just Swift's built-in classes. So AFNetworking is an example of a power tool. So they're not doing anything that we couldn't have written on our own. But using AFNetworking, we can now conveniently talk to these outside sources without doing additional work. So, having said that, a couple of things we need to understand about AFNetworking. All right, so AFNetworking is a third-party library for making what's called asynchronous. It's really difficult to write that in all caps and keep it spelled right. Okay. For making asynchronous HTTP requests to outside data sources. All right, and what does asynchronous mean? Asynchronous do the request in the background without blocking the rest of the app. All right, and this comes with its own side effect, and that is, so for instance, if I say I'm going to go ahead and grab the latest weather in my app, so I have a button that's going to grab the latest weather, and let's say that button grabs the latest weather and then goes to a second page in my application. Well, it's going to go to that second page while that weather is already being retrieved. So now I have to play this game of making sure that second page becomes aware of the weather report that I retrieved when the weather report is actually available. Because I've already arrived at that second page, because that request was done asynchronously. It was done without stopping me from moving on to that second page. As opposed to synchronous communication, which would say, okay, I'm going to wait here for the weather report to come back. Okay, now it's back. Now let's go to that second page. So AFNetworking handles asynchronous communication, which is great from the perspective of writing kind of internet-aware applications and making them feel fast. That way when you hit a button, there's not like this pause in your application. But it's bad, well, I say bad, it adds complication to your application, because now what you have to do is you have to deal with the various mechanisms for becoming aware when the data is available, and then letting whoever's interested in it know that I now have the weather information. Here it is. Update your screen accordingly. Okay. So asynchronous communication is good from a your app feeling fast perspective, but adds complexity to your app being able to fill in data. So AF networking handles that for us. So imagine having to write that by hand. It's not the end of the world, but asynchronous is more difficult to write, but makes your app a little bit faster. So that's why we use something like AF networking. All right, so now the downside to AF networking. AF networking was written in Objective-C. Okay, so it's a library that was originally written in Objective-C as opposed to Swift. So one thing we're going to have to do is we have to use a bridge file to bring an Objective-C library into our Swift-based project. So XCode is capable of having XCode and Swift, or Objective-C and Swift live side by side, but it does this through this this bridge header file in order to kind of make that connection. And CocoaPods handles some of that for us, and we'll see that here in a few minutes when we actually look at an example. But in any case, that's what AF networking is. There is a Swift competitor to AF networking called Alamo Fire. All right, and this has become fairly popular, where you don't actually have to use AF networking with the bridge file. Instead, you just use Alamo Fire directly. Downside to that is AF networking is kind of an industry standard. It's been used for a while. Let's call it time tested and developer approved. So I would think that most developers would still use AF networking and just deal with the side effect of having to bridge it into your application through that header file. Okay, so that's what AF networking is. Now let's talk about this thing called CocoaPods. All right, so one of the things that you may have already dealt with in XCode, depending on how far you are through the coursework at this point, is sometimes when they ask you to drop something into the project from external, when you bring something in that's somewhere else on your computer, you either A, drop it in the wrong place, or B, you don't actually copy the files in. Instead, it just creates a symbolic link to those files. In any case, anytime we manually bring something into our project, we kind of open ourselves up for weird errors. Something like that. So what CocoaPods does is it takes away that requirement of us having to copy stuff in. All right, so CocoaPods is a package management tool for XCode. So we run this from the command line within the directory of our XCode project, and it creates a Workspace-based project that is a collection of our project as well as a pod project with any of the third-party things we asked it to include. All right, so in our example here, we're going to be including AF networking. There also is an AF networking -UI kit that we can also put in there that you'll be using for the Instagram version of this. So I'll show you that as well. So that's what CocoaPods is. So let's do this real quick. So let me open up, let's go the entire screen first. And I'm going to go to the CocoaPods website. All right, so here's CocoaPods website. So first thing they say is this is how you install it. So on your Mac, just go out to the terminal, this guy, and issue that command, sudo gem install CocoaPods. So your Mac already has Ruby installed on it, so that's what that gem thing is. And this will install CocoaPods on your computer. After you do that, you also then need to do pod setup. So if you type in pod setup here, what it'll do is it'll make sure your CocoaPods repository from GitHub is all up to date. It does all the magic for you. All right, you only have to do those two things one time, and maybe you do the pod setup, well, I don't know, maybe once a month or something like that, just to make sure you have all the latest, greatest stuff. Okay, so let's just say you've gone through the process now of getting CocoaPods installed on your computer. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up XCode, and we're going to create a new project. All right, and I'm going to make this a single view application, and I'll make this bigger here in a second. And remember, I'm recording all this, so in the event that some of the text isn't real visible for you, don't worry about it. It'll be recorded at high definition. So let's call this AFNetworking starter. Okay. Let's call this guy Thinkful Combat Thinkful. All right, so it's going to be a Swift project, so we'll go ahead and hit next, and I'm going to store this guy in my downloads folder for right now. And I'll make sure I create a Git repository on my Mac. All right, so important thing right now is you have a project. We're going to be closing this project here in a second because we're going to use CocoaPods to do some stuff for us. All right, so what we need to do out here is first we need to move into the directory where that our Xcode project is. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move into my downloads folder, and then my directory is called AFNetworking starter or something like that. Starter. There we go. Okay, so I'm sitting in that directory where and here, let me elevate this guy on the screen a little bit for you so you can maybe see it a little better. So I'm sitting in the directory where my Xcode project is. Okay, so once we're in here, we're going to do a pod init. Okay, and we only have to do this command once. What this is going to do is it's going to generate something called a pod file for us. So now we have pod init. So if I do ls, we see we have a new file in here called pod file. All right, that pod file is where we're going to keep our information about the CocoaPod projects that we're going to bring in. So I'm going to go back to the web here, and at CocoaPods.org, I'm going to go ahead and do a search for AFNetworking. Okay, so notice we have AFNetworking up here. We should also have an AFNetworking Plus. I think it's called UI Kit. Networking Plus. Oh, maybe that's in normal AFNetworking now. Actually, I think it is. All right, so we're just going to go to AFNetworking, this guy right here. All right, so this is the name of our project, and it tells us how to install it. So the name of the project is called AFNetworking, so we'll go ahead and grab this line right here. So I'll copy that. Now we're going to go out to our pod file, and I'll go ahead and edit the pod file. You can edit it in whatever editor you like. You can even open it in XCode. All right. When we use Swift, we need to make sure that we uncomment that line, and it tells us that. Uncomment this line if you're using Swift. All right, so Swift requires us to use something called frameworks. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and paste that line inside of our target AFNetworking starter. All these other things are for unit testing things, so just ignore the existence of these things for now. So you're going to paste whatever pods you want to install right there inside of that target. All right, and that's it for this file. So basically, any projects, any third-party projects that you want to include in your Xcode project that you can find on CocoaPods.org, you put in that file. So in this case, we only want AFNetworking available to us. So I went ahead and added that to my pod file. So now all we have to do is say pod install. So it's going to go and do some magical stuff and ultimately install AFNetworking. And it tells us to close our XCode session. So I'll go ahead and do that. All right, now when I type ls here, you notice we have a new thing that was created. And here's that workspace that it created for us. So this is a combination of our starter project that we already had along with this new project that it just generated for us with AFNetworking built into it. All right, this is in contrast to what Thinkful asks you to do, which is go to the GitHub repository for AFNetworking, download it locally to your computer, drag it manually into your project, and then hope it doesn't break things. That's their approach to it. This is the better approach. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open that workspace file. So from this point forward, whenever we're using a CocoaPods project, CocoaPods based project, we always open the workspace so we get both of those Xcode projects sitting next to each other. So we'll see this open inside of Xcode. You could also just go to File Open in Xcode and go and find that file. All right, so notice here that we have both of our projects here. We have AFNetworking Starter, and we have our CocoaPods, and inside of here we have our, actually that framework isn't something that we need right now, but here's AFNetworking. It brought it in for us, so we have access to it and all that jazz. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go into our normal project, and we're going to go into our view controller. And actually, for the moment, I'm going to go ahead and just build my entire project. Actually, let me take it off of my iPad here so it doesn't ask me to join a group. So I'll go ahead and build this, and this gives us access to AFNetworking and all that stuff. So now I can do import AFNetworking like that. All right, we'll go ahead and do a build again. All right, and I think with the newest version, you don't actually have to do the bridge file. So we'll find out if that's the case here in a second. I think CocoaPods does everything for us. So again, understand that AFNetworking is a Objective-C library that we brought into a Swift project. And usually that requires some extra work on our part, but with CocoaPods, it's much easier. We used to have to create that bridging header as well, but I think since it let me do this, we won't have to. And I think that has to do with that frameworks thing we did in our pod file. So having said that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead over to our Slack channel here, and I'm going to go ahead and grab the code I pasted for you guys in there. This guy right here. All right, and does that give me? Oh, this is the weather thing. We'll update it for the other thing here in a minute. So what I'll do is I'll just do this inside of view did load. All right, so this is going to create. This is the updated code. So this is the fixed version of what we currently have on the in the Swift course. So we're creating a variable called manager that's going to be this AF HTTP session manager. That guy's new. Then we're going to use that manager to get the contents of this URL, which is a big, long, random way of getting some, what am I getting here? Some weather. This is getting the weather forecast. All right, we're going to pass that guy no parameters. And then this guy right here is called a closure. And what I'm going to do here to show you this is let me do a second manager.get here. Manager.get. So notice here, and here, let's just pump it out here. So manager.get takes the several parameters. The first one is the website that you want it to go to. The second parameter is any parameters you need to send to that website to make it work. The third thing is the thing that I'm most interested in right here. So notice that guy kind of looks like a function, okay? So when we pass a function as a parameter into another function, that's called a closure, all right? So this is a very modern way of programming things. So what ends up happening is when, so this function will get called while it's processing. This function here will get called once it's done processing on success. This function here is what will get called if something bad happened. Okay, so notice my call up here is, this is my function that I want to be called while this thing is processing, and I'm not doing anything in there. I don't care about the time that it's taking to actually request this weather report. I just care about when the weather report is done. So on success, I'm going to call this other function, and this function is going to take in a NSURL session data task, whatever, and it's going to take in a response object. All right, that response object is actually going to be the JSON formatted response for this request. That's going to actually have our weather stuff in it, and that's what the next section of the Thinkful course is taking you through. And all I'm doing right now is I'm printing out that JSON request. All right, so let me go ahead. I just wanted to show you this from that closure perspective, that Swift supports us passing functions to other functions. So I'll go ahead and build this, and we hope it's all cool. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and launch this application, and we'll see that it's going to print out here to the console that JSON object, which is what you'll need to do things for the next part of the course. All right, so down here we see this is what was returned by that request. This is for Nome, Alaska, apparently. So in any case, that's what you get back from that. All right, so that will be kind of a starting point for that. But now the problem, so along with AFNetworking changing, Instagram also changed their API. It's no longer open. You now have to register your application with Instagram, which makes using their API substantially more difficult. But what they did at Thinkful is they created a code that all the students can use. So I'm going to go ahead and just replace that URL with that line. So this is pretty much the same thing that they were going to before, except now you have this special client ID that makes your application look like it's a legitimate application. Okay, so I'll go ahead and run this. And this guy should return. Uh-oh. Does that mean that guy is not good anymore? Oh, no, we're fine. We're fine. Because what we'll have to do, let's go over to the Thinkful course here. I'll just show you this part of it while we're at it. Because we're making an HTTPS-based request, let me just get into the Swift course here. Because we're making an HTTPS-based request, we have to put in some extra security stuff into our plist file inside of XCode. It's only going to take a second to do, but what we'll do here is, so here's in lesson 2 of Unit 4 is where they talk about the AF networking stuff and calling web services. This is pretty much the stuff we just talked about. So now here's the calling Instagram section. And it's going to give us the thing we have to do here. Here's the request that we got. What's the client ID? Actually, let me go up. Oh, they have updated the course, Vincent, by the way. So hopefully you guys have the updated course, but they actually take you through how the course should be updated now. All right, so having said that, let me go back down here and let me show you the extra piece you have to do. Just have to get the security thing. Okay, just as we did in lesson 2, we have to add the exception domain to the info list. So Is that inside of AFNetworking listen to here? Yeah, this is all this header file stuff that you will not have to do if you use CocoaPods. Just looking for the oh, and they even mention Alamo Fire here as well.
So you get the AFNetworking file that online.
Let's see.
The steps are a little.
Here's the section on closures that talk about what we just talked about. Yeah, here's the info plist stuff. So what we need to do is we're going to steal this guy right here. So we're going to add something to our info plist. We're going to add something specifically for Instagram. So I'll show you where to do that. So I just copied that code so we would have it. So I'm going to go into our file up here. So we have something called info plist that looks like this. And I think I can I view this as code? Or I view this as code. Well, I guess it won't matter then. So then we're going to go ahead and add it as a NS app transport security. I'd really rather do this at the open as source code. Right click on it, open as source code. That's what I want. So we'll right click here. I guess that's not in there anymore. So open with external editor, maybe. Let's see what that opens up.
So you right click, open as. Oh, you can't when you right click, it won't.
Oh, there we go. Open as source code. Thank you. Okay, so we'll kind of go down near the bottom here, and we're going to add this new key here. So this is a dictionary, this is a dictionary, that's a dictionary. Okay, so we copied that. So we're going to add it right here. Except the exception domain is not going to be this guy. It's going to instead be our Instagram guy. So let me go grab that from here. That's api.instagram.com. Like that, and then we should be good there. So we're adding an exception here that allows our application to talk to this guy through HTTPS. So notice we have this error message we got here that it couldn't establish this secure connection because our app blocked it. So just adding this section here should let us do it. So now I should be able to run this and actually get the response back from Instagram.
I don't have to do it. And Jay must have just changed that last week.
Yeah, the coursework is updated. They must have just put that in there.
Yeah, they must have done that late last week.
Yeah, it's the first time I've seen it. Waiting for my app to actually launch here. I wonder if the simulator's in a bad mood right now. Let's just kill it and then reopen it. It might not have liked the way it crashed before. Okay, there we go. So now we see down here we have a whole bunch of Instagram-y stuff that we can use to do things. All right, so that brings back pictures and things like that. Let me just test something here real quick. AFNetworking plus UI kit. Is that what it is? Plus UI kit? Let me go down to the. I just want to make sure you have everything you need for the project for the asynchronous stuff. UI kit plus AFNetworking. This guy. So I bet you we still need to get that from CocoaPods. I thought it was included, but let's go back to CocoaPods here. But this is good because then I can show you how to add another project. UI kit plus, let's just go that route. All right, so it's not in there. Let's see if it's just part of AFNetworking. Let me do something here real quick. Let's see here. So what this piece that we're talking about here does is that whenever you see something that has a plus sign in it like this, that's usually an indicator. So what they've done is AFNetworking has a library in it that extends the built-in UI kit for iOS development. And one of the things it does is it gives us this updated version of a UI image view. All right, so this updated image view allows us to create an image with a URL. Okay, set image with URL. And this will load that image asynchronously. So earlier we talked about asynchronous. So rather than like they're going to end up putting this all in a table view, these bunch of pictures in a table view. So rather than your table view sitting there just paused while all these pictures are downloading, your table view will be able to be scrolled and all that stuff. And then as each picture becomes available, it will each picture becomes available, it will just pop in. So I'm going to steal this code real quick and let's just see if it if XCode knows about it. All right, and so let's see. So we're going to just put in a random URL here. www.imageurl.com. Good enough. Oh, then we don't actually have a scroll view here, so let's just take this guy out here. And take this guy out. Well, whatever. We'll just say 5. That stuff's not really important. Okay, it already knows about it. So forget about all this stuff over here. You'll read about that when you do the coursework, but it's this line right here that proves that AFNetworking now comes with its what's called a, so I'll put it out here afterwards. This is a UI kit category. And a category essentially augments an existing class with some new abilities. So rather than creating a brand new version of an image view, of a UI image view, AFNetworking has augmented UI image view with some extra stuff that allows it to load images asynchronously. So that stuff should just work as is. You shouldn't have to do anything special there. So that's our CocoaPod project. Well, our AFNetworking CocoaPod project. So it's pretty easy to get the stuff in, and this talks to Instagram as is. So if you don't want to create your own project, your own client ID, you can just use the one that we have here. Now, one last thing I need to show you. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to push this to GitHub so you have access to it. But I'm going to show you how you push a project that has CocoaPods in it, because you have to do something special. So let's just go to GitHub real quick, and I'll create a new repository. And what did I call this guy? I called this guy AFNetworking Starter. So we'll call this AF AFNetworking CocoaPods starter. Something like that. All right, so we have that guy. And I'll go ahead and copy this line right here. That's the destination. There we go. Go back into XCode, go to source control, configure AFNetworking starter. I'm going to go to remotes. I'm going to add a brand new remote. The remote I'm going to add is the address I just copied under name origin. So I'll click add remote there. All right, so now we'll go under source control and we're going to do commit. This is going to be our initial commit, and this is the important part. So I'll go ahead and add my comment down here, initial commit. Now up top here, what it's done is it's selected my AFNetworking starter stuff. And that stuff's all important, so we need to have that. But we also need to go ahead and select the workspace, and then we need to go down to our pod project, and we're going to select the project settings and that pod file. Okay? So we select all those things. We'll only have to do this once, but this will give the project its context so it can rebuild the workspace. Okay, so I'll go ahead and commit that and also push it up to the repository. And then I'm going to also show you how to check this out so it works on your end. So you'll see the last piece that we have to do. It'll only take a second. So let me log in here. Because I'm not distributing this with all of the AFNetworking files, just the CocoaPods stuff that allows you to build those AFNetworking files, you actually have to run pod update on your end every time. So this guy is currently up here. So I'll go ahead and run this. So there's my project. So I'm going to give you this URL inside of Slack. I'll just go ahead and post that in there right now. All right, so that's in Slack. And the way you do this is you open up XCode on your computer, go to source control, go to checkout, and just paste that URL in there. All right, and this is going to go and find it. And it's going to ask you where you want to save it. I'm going to put this on my desktop for right now. We'll go ahead and hit download, and it went ahead and opened up the workspace. Notice I have both projects there. But right now it's not going to work because I don't actually have the pod files. I have the structure of it, but in order for this to work, I have to go to my desktop. Let's see, what is it? That guy. Go into the directory that it just checked out where my pod file is, and just do a pod install. So you'll have to do this on your computer. Just do a pod install, and that'll bring down the AFNetworking stuff that I didn't put on GitHub, and now your project will work like it's supposed to work. Notice it's indexing up here, so this guy should just be ready to go now. So I'll go ahead and run this, and it should pop up. And there is our code here. So that last part there is exactly what you'll have to do on your computer, assuming you already have CocoaPods installed, which was that very first thing we talked about at the beginning of this project. Okay, so that's kind of your crash course in CocoaPods and AFNetworking and everything you'll need to give yourself the correct base starting point